Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's Frontline 5 workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. First responders and mental health experts collaboratively created FST5 to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, finances, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcast, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Minds on the Frontline is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, as well as the chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee and a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association. Mike has training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is our subject matter expert. Together, we hope to inform, educate, and entertain frontline workers, their families, and the general public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Unfortunately, Mike wasn't able to join us today, but he'll be back in the next episode. Today, we are proud to welcome my friend, Bryan Blattert. His transition from a committed firefighter and paramedic to a clinical therapist is as inspiring as it is remarkable. Bryan's early career at the Grand Rapids Fire Department was met with an unforeseen challenge after suffering a grave accident in 2010 while preparing for a dirt bike race. Unfortunately, the accident ended Bryan's career as a first responder and inflicted a spinal cord injury that forever altered the course of his life. Undeterred by his circumstances, Bryan embraced a new path, focusing on his abilities and the support of his community to adapt and thrive. His indomitable spirit led him to further his education in social work, driven by a desire to support others facing trauma. Today, as a clinician and owner of Arrowhead Behavioral Health in Fowlerville, Michigan, he offers trauma therapy, which is a testament to his resilience and dedication to helping others navigate their most challenging experiences. Bryan's journey is a demonstration to the transformative power of resilience in the face of trauma. His transition from a dedicated firefighter and paramedic to a clinical therapist has given him a profound understanding of recovery. Specializing in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, Bryan uses this innovative, evidence-based method to help individuals heal from traumatic experiences. EMDR is unique as it doesn't rely on talk therapy or medications. Instead, it's an interactive psychotherapy technique that uses a patient's own rhythmic eye movements. These movements dampen the power of emotionally charged memories of past traumatic events. In EMDR therapy sessions, clients concentrate on traumatic memories while engaging in guided eye movements, which is a bilateral stimulation that serves as mental recalibration. This process is akin to updating computer software for improved function, allowing EMDR to reprogram the brain's reaction to trauma, fostering healthier, more manageable responses. EMDR's purpose is clear-cut. It reduces trauma-related stress and cultivates coping mechanisms for individuals to handle these memories without intense stress. The approach not only lessens the severity of traumatic memories, but also bolsters the individual's ability to encounter these memories with a less disruptive response. Supported by extensive peer-reviewed research, EMDR has proven effective for many who find limited relief from traditional talk therapy. Consider this analogy. Imagine a scenario where a particular song triggers anxiety as a reminder of a traumatic event. EMDR therapy aims to adjust the automatic emotional responses so that the song no longer provokes stress, allowing for a recognition of the memory without the distressing emotional reaction. As we dive deeper into today's discussion, Bryan will share his experiences and his insights into EMDR, shedding light on its process, who it can help, and why it's considered a significant breakthrough in the field of psychological treatment. This was a great episode, and we really enjoyed having Bryan on the show. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you, and enjoy the show. What's up, Bryan?
Not much. How are you doing today?
Real good. Thanks for joining us today. Kick us off. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
My name is Bryan Blattert. I work as a clinical therapist and own a mental health practice in Fowlerville, Michigan.
Well, give us some more detail, because previously you were a frontline worker. You used to be a firefighter. You were a paramedic. Give everybody a little more detail. How'd you get there?
Okay, so going all the way back, I guess as a young kid, my oldest brother was and is a fireman. So I always grew up knowing that I wanted to work in the fire service. So right after graduating high school, I went to basic EMT school. That really ignited my passion for the medical aspect of the fire service and being a first responder. So I continued that and went to paramedic school. After graduating from OCC with my paramedic license, I went on to work in private EMS. And then I did that for several years until getting hired in Grand Rapids Fire and working as a fireman and a paramedic there.
So obviously you get it. You were a frontline provider. You transitioned to your new occupation, but it wasn't like you just said, hey, I'm going to go become a clinical therapist and put all the frontline stuff behind you. And you were a first responder, decided to move on. Why don't you tell everybody how you got to that point? What made that decision kind of for you at the time in your life?
I mean, primarily what stopped me from working as a fireman was my injury. I was injured racing motocross in 2010 and retired from fire. I was retired at the age of 25 and wondering what I'm going to do with my life. Obviously, I wanted more than just being retired forever. So I kind of did some soul searching and was looking at all the things that I really had passion for, what I loved doing, and kind of connecting it to what I did and what I could do in the future still in a wheelchair with my spinal cord injury. And really the one major point that I identified was helping people. I always loved serving and helping people as a first responder, and I wanted to continue doing that moving forward in my future career. And then I kind of came across the profession of being a therapist. I knew somebody that was a therapist, talked to them, learned a little bit about the job, and it was just basically my goal moving forward. So I started back to school. I think about a year, I would say, after I was retired, I started back to school. I was aiming towards my bachelor's in social work at Wayne State. I graduated from there, and then I attended Michigan State University to obtain my master's in clinical social work from there.
Right on. And what are your primary patients? What's the demographic of the people you see for the most part?
I primarily focus on specializing in trauma and treating people that have trauma exposures. But I really work with children all the way up to people probably as old as maybe 60 on my caseload right now. I have a background in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I specialized in grad school. And that's for treating kids ages 3 to 17. And then I went on after, probably about 6 months after graduating from Michigan State. I knew I always wanted to get trained in EMDR. I know that was taken off in the fire service at the time. I knew people that had gotten that treatment. It was really, really effective. So 6 months after, I went to EMDR school, got certified in that, and started practicing that. And that really opened it up to all ages, essentially. You can use EMDR to treat all ages. So.
Yeah, I want to really dive into EMDR in this episode. But before we do that, would you mind going a little more detail about the struggles you went through and kind of getting to this great point in your life? Now, you're a business owner. You're a successful therapist. You got almost too many patients, which is a good thing as a business owner. But it wasn't always so easy for you. You know, everybody listening might not know you and I have been good buddies for a long time. You know, you were a student in the fire academy when you and I met. You know, I was young there, you were young there, and we became real good buddies. And I watched you go through what you had to deal with. So give everybody context of, like, it wasn't, you're making it really sound easy, but you went through it. Give everybody some detail of the day that you got hurt and then getting back to the point where you have this lifestyle of, like, happiness and stability.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't always easy. I would say the first year of my injury was super difficult to get through. But backing up to the day that I was injured, I took an AM vacation from fire to get some more track time. I was preparing to go down to Tennessee. I think probably about a month later, I would have been racing in Tennessee.
And you weren't just racing, or you were trying to make a run at it. You were trying to go higher level racing?
It was just, yeah, still progress, I guess, in that on the side. I mean, my overall career focus was obviously being a first responder and a fireman, but it was definitely a lifelong passion of mine was racing. So yeah, it was an amateur national in Tennessee that I'd qualified for. So it was a little bit step up from what I had been usually doing. Wanted to get some more track time. And then kind of going back to the race, I had hit a triple wrong, came off my bike, and then came kind of straight down on my head from probably about 40 foot up and crushed T2 through 6, and then had some frontal lobe bleeds. So I actually lost memory. I don't remember anything about the event. I just remember being at the starting line, and then sort of fast forward to about maybe 4 weeks after my injury, I started getting what I would call like foggy memory back of everything. But after I had crashed during that race, I was med-flighted, went into respiratory arrest, med-flighted to Bronson Trauma in Kalamazoo. I was there for approximately about 7 days, 8 days, and then I was transferred to Mary Free Bed in Grand Rapids. So
yeah, and that was the first time I came and saw you with our buddy Dave, and we checked you out, and you were doing pretty well considering what you just went through for the previous 7-8 days. You spent some time in a coma. You had family all around you, and it was pretty intense. And then after that, you were lucky enough to get a medical retirement from the fire department. And then it was like, all right, now what? So what was that like going from, okay, at least I'm medically okay to start on with a new life? What does that look like?
Tons of support from the fire department and our union. I mean, the guys remodeled the house that I was renting just to make it, wheelchair accessible. And then later on, I'd bought a house. I mean, they came out and built wheelchair ramps. So I definitely want to emphasize the support I got from everybody in the fire department, even you, Dave. I mean, it wasn't just even Grand Rapids Fire. It was everybody in the whole fire community almost in Michigan. So after I had kind of the dust settled, got home, I was really struggling, and I struggled with depression and a lot of the symptoms classic with PTSD. I was having nightmares and all those types of things. And then finally it was like a light switch, and I just kind of, I took responsibility, I guess, for moving forward, getting things going, and I just didn't want to sit around like that anymore and feel like that. So I just got back to living. Part of that was finding a new career, getting going in school, but it was also just getting back to all my normal recreation stuff, hunting, fishing, being outdoors, spending time with family and friends and all that. And that really kind of jump-started me to get going. Instead of just sitting around sort of, I guess, with the victim mentality, I took responsible for moving forward.
Yeah, you do more things than a lot of people I know that have 2 working legs. You hunt and fish more than most people I know, which is pretty badass. You're out there on the Can-Am doing fun stuff on your property. You're not letting stuff stop you. So it sounds like it's really the motivation of life and your thirst for having a good time that's like, well, if I'm going to have a good time, it's not going to be sitting around in here feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah, no, I knew I had to get going. I had never been a depressed person, a person that really sat around, and I knew that was part of my life that I was missing. So I got it back, and honestly, that was like flicking on a light switch for me. It just motivated me to continue going and going and going, and then which progressed into me obviously going to school, start my practice, and then moving forward to today. I just continue to take on more challenges. So,
do you think that was part of the link of choosing a mental health profession, was that you almost needed to understand how to guide your thoughts to have this powerful life, and in the process, you realized you could help people?
Absolutely. I mean, part of it was I spent time in a pretty dark place, and I remember thinking, like, if I could help other people get out of this, that would be great. I knew other people felt that way and likely a lot worse at times, and I just didn't really want to allow others to feel that way. And if I could help them out, then I could help them out. And that was one of the guiding factors to becoming a therapist.
Yeah, you've always had like an innate connection with people. You're a people person. You like people. You like connecting and understanding how they feel. You like to play it off like you're not this smart guy who can do stuff. You like to pretend like you're a dummy. But I think emotionally, you have a high degree of intelligence. And you can kind of sniff it on people. And I think that helps you out a lot as a clinician. So let's get in a little bit more of your practice. EMDR. What is it? What do those fancy letters stand for that I start to hear on all these podcasts, not just ours, but you listen to the Hubermans and the health people and everybody else out there, and mental, behavioral, and physical health has never been more popular. And EMDR is one of those things a lot of people are just talking about. And I hope it's not just some fad thing. Tell everybody what EMDR is and like how it works and all that.
Yeah, it's gaining a lot more recognition. When I went to school for it, I mean, it was obviously known, but I'm hearing it talked about a lot more, and a lot more people are wanting to focus on it and getting trained in it. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So what we do with that is use any form of bilateral stimulation. It could be tapping on both shoulders. Traditionally, everybody knows it for the eye movements. I think that's what's most formally known for. But I have all kinds of gadgets. You can have a headset on that plays noise in each ear, take a walk.
And when you say bilateral, you're talking about getting both sides of the brain to start working, right?
Yep.
And that's the whole idea, is to kind of activate both sides?
That's exactly what we're doing. We're going to access and activate specific things, right? Use the bilateral movement or bilateral stimulation to activate both sides of your brain to kind of jumpstart it, to start to do a software update and almost heal itself like it does in majority of trauma exposures. But for some people, they just get stuck and they need that to assist it.
So EMDR allows you to kind of access parts of your brain like a computer and kind of like, okay, there's this bug in the system. And every time it runs this program, this bug comes up and stops me from doing that thing or starts me from doing a thing. And then this kind of does a Control-Alt-Delete on that thing?
Yeah, it kind of does a Control-Alt-Delete or does like an update with it. You think if something happens at the age of 7, you have this neural network that's stored with all these sensations, images, sounds, smells, all this stuff. It stays at that age of 7, even when you're 37, say, right? So I can access and activate that with a series of questions that'll take you back, and it sort of accesses that network, okay? Once I'm in that network, then we start the reprocessing stage. I like to think of this traumatic memory, if you're stuck, and it didn't get processed right and healed properly, I like to think of it as all these puzzle pieces that are scattered apart, By me reprocessing it allows them to form together, go together, and your brain digest it and stores it as a past memory so you stop living it in the present. That's something that usually will tell you if you're stuck is when past stuff pops up and you continue to relive it in the present, like nightmares, flashbacks.
And not just thinking about it, having a manifestation, a physical sign and symptom that I'm experiencing from the memory. Because I can think of bad things that have happened to me or people around me where it doesn't negatively impact. I can reflect on it. But what you're saying is reflecting on it in any way, shape, or form produces a trigger from these traumatic memories. And then the EMDR allows me to kind of work through that, not just through talking and cognitive behavioral therapy, but literally like firing up my brain in a way that lets it chill for a minute and unplug itself from that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can re-experience, say, a body sensation. You'll often re-experience these during processing, What we're doing in EMDR is, from 30 to sometimes 90 seconds of, say, we'll just use eye movements as the bilateral stimulation. And you're just reporting the chapter headlines to me or the titles of the chapters. You're not really reading the story word for word and reliving the trauma. Like
so I'm going through the stimulation and I'm just kind of repeating what I'm feeling about that moment?
Yeah, so like I'm going to ask you a series of questions to take you to that call. So I'm going to access and activate it, right? I'm going to jump in with a negative belief typically, right? A body sensation. And
because you want to stimulate that negative feeling?
I want you to focus on the incident. Typically, I'll have you identify a negative belief, which is kind of the governor that the incident put on your brain. And then also any body sensation. So say you when you focus on it, you feel something in your stomach. Have you focus on those 3 things, right? And then that's typically where we'll start off with. So I'll do a series of eye movements. And then I'll let your brain go wherever it wants with that because we're in the neural network at that point, and we're kind of traveling down the highway systems for 60-ish seconds. And then after that 60 seconds, I'll stop, say, take a deep breath, we'll take a good inhale and exhale. And I'll just say, what do you notice or what comes to mind, And then you'll say like, well, I'm walking with the drug box to the backyard, or something along those lines, And you might say a little bit more. I'll let you talk for a little bit until you kind of stop. You might imagine images, body sensations, emotions, whatever you report, And then I'll have you report that again, jump back in, do a series of eye movements, and so on, until you continue to report that same thing a couple times in a row. And then we stop and we'll start to focus on desensitizing the incident. So how disturbing is it? 0 to 10, 10 being the highest. Say it's a 9 at first, and then this changes the format a little bit. So once we have you report the same thing, a couple times in a row, I'll stop you and we'll focus on lowering your SUD, so the disturbance level.
So let me ask you right there. Let me just make sure I understand. When you say I report the same thing, I'm not progressing more, or I've kind of leveled off to where I'm going to be with that feeling about where I am in the incident.
So we're at the end of the neural network with that incident. So you'll say like, yeah, we just got back to the firehouse, and we're just sitting there eating some ice cream. And then I'll say, okay, focus on that. Yeah. That seems to happen.
We're always eating ice cream. Yeah, I get it.
So you say that, and then I'll say, okay, go with that. We're eating the ice cream at the firehouse. And I might do one more. I'm kind of like a really beat it in the ground clinician. I like to really make sure we got things dialed in. So
that's very first responder of you.
I might do another round of it, and then you say the same thing, and I'll say, okay, we need to start desensitizing you. So from 0 to 10, 0 being no disturbance, to 10 being the highest, I initially asked that during the access and activate stage, right? So say you were at a 9, and I'm going to ask you where you're at, and you're like, I'm at a 9, So now we're going to shorten up the duration or the time length of these eye movements. So I'm going to probably do like 20 seconds or so. So I'm going to say, just focus on the overall incident, right? And do a round of eye movements for 20 seconds. Okay, what do you think of the incident? How disturbing is it now? 0 to 10. And you'll say, typically it's going to continue lower. So you'll say 7. Okay, focus on the incident. And when I continue to do that, we're trained to do it when it's a 2 or less. Again, I'm a beat it in the ground kind of guy. I make sure it's a 0. Sometimes you're at a 1 and I'm like, why is it a 1? And we'll figure out a way. There's a way, the reasoning that you're hanging on to it. You're like, it's supposed to be a bad thing. But really we're looking for like that stress response when you think of it. We're never going to make it a happy memory. We're never going to get rid of it out of your brain. You know what I mean? But we're trying to take that stress response out. So
you just don't want it to impact you.
Yeah, we're going to get it down to a 0, right? And that means we've kind of reduced and took that governor of that negative belief off your brain, essentially. Now we want to pair the positive belief governor. So it's like, I did the best I could might be an example, maybe the negative belief was like, we could have done more, that you kept thinking about the incident. So we're going to take that governor off, get rid of the stress response with it. Now we're going to pair a positive belief and put that new governor. That's a healthy governor. So you can look back at that incident and say, we did the best we could. Like, I know we did everything we could. So we do that, and that's called the validity of cognition. So initially in that access and activate stage, I ask you, when you think of the incident and then that positive belief, how true do those words feel 1 to 7, 1 being false, 7 being completely true. You're at maybe a 2, say. So now we're going to have you at this stage of EMDR, we're going to have you focus on the incident and then that positive belief. And then we're going to do some slower tapping, typically is how I'll do it for installation. So slower strengthens things with EMDR. So the slower the pace, faster desensitizes those neural networks. So when we're processing, we're going faster. Say a slower pace might be something like that.
So let me pause you right there real quick to make sure we're all following along. You activate the brain with bilateral stimulation to get it rolling. Then you stress it out by reintroducing this negative memory or the trauma. Then you desensitize the experience to the trauma. You get as close to being there as you can, stimulate the negative feelings, walk closer and closer to it, take a break, go back and forth. Now I'm desensitized. And then now instead of approaching this and saying, I'm managing a negative feeling, let me put some positive stuff in there to reinforce that we did what we did. So it's reprogramming in a way that allows me to get rid of the bad and input something that's more positive and objectively better for me. Not deleting it, not, like you said, putting a bad spin on it, but I'm putting it in a context in my brain where it's not going to affect me in a negative way anymore, that I can address it and move on.
Yeah, we're taking that old negative belief, which typically with negative beliefs, they're going to be irrational, right? We know that first responders go on the job and you do the best you can. Sometimes you don't get the desired outcome, but it's not because you didn't do your best job, but you might develop that negative belief. So we take that old negative belief off of your brain. What I always think of it as the governor, right? It doesn't allow you to think of it any other way. So
it's almost like governor. It's like the opposite. It's like a turbo. It's like spinning up this negative thing that doesn't need to be spun up.
It just doesn't allow you to think any other way than that.
Yeah.
So I like to just like take it off. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of that negative belief. And then we want to put this new governor on of the positive belief, right? So that's what I'm going to strengthen up with slower BLS or bilateral movement.
Okay. So I get the point about like how you stimulate. That makes total sense. Help me understand how the eye movement and the tapping or the other type of stimulation, what is going on there?
Traditionally with eye movements, we're going to do processing, right?
Okay.
I've always done more manual input as far as tapping on both your knees. You might put your hands on a pillow and I could tap on both hands. Even sometimes during kids doing art therapy, you could tap both of their shoulders while they're doing drawings and things. So it's really your preference. And honestly, before COVID, we were right next to each other. You're right in front of me and I'm right next to you. It was like when COVID hit, it sort of put this space between us. So then it was like, you're doing your own tapping, or now telehealth introduced a lot, or has got a lot heavier. So now say you and I are on a computer, so I'm having you tap your own knees or walking through it, if you can imagine just doing this with your feet.
Yeah.
So how I have you do your own BLS.
So this is something you could do completely verbally over Zoom.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We do. I do it via telehealth quite a bit. I have clients all the way in the UP.
And there's data to support that it's just as effective virtually as it is face-to-face?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've never had any issue with doing any telehealth and doing EMDR over there.
Because in a lot of ways, it almost feels like a hypnosis.
I've never had it done to me, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Not even in school. You guys didn't EMDR
We did do
each other?
some. Yeah, we did do some, and I did do reducing the level of disturbance and stuff. I had focused on some of my own past traumas. But yeah, I didn't do like a whole processing session. It was very quick and like fragmented. It wasn't like I got to come into a clinical setting and sit for an hour.
You didn't go through the whole experience so much as the steps of the phase.
Yeah, it was like the stages and stuff.
It'd almost be like when you're in medic school, like we almost have to hurt you and 911 has to show up and take you in.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, right? That would almost make you appreciate the system more.
Yeah, exactly. I do have experience with that.
You do. You don't remember it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the flight part. I've been hurt many other times. So
that's true.
I'm kind of a specialist with that.
So what is VOC, and kind of relate those things to us?
Yeah. So after we completely desensitize you to that incident, get you down to a 0, right? I'm going to put that new positive belief governor on your brain, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to strengthen that up with slower bilateral movement, typically tapping, or just slow up the speed. That's all we got to do to strengthen and hardwire that in. So I'm going to have you focus on the incident and the positive belief, right? And initially, I'm going to ask you during that access and activate before we even started processing, when you think of this incident and your positive belief that you identified, how true does that feel? 1 to 7, 1 being false, 7 being completely true. Say you're at a 2, we're going to start with that. So I'm just going to jump in and say, hey, okay, focus on the incident and your positive belief. And I'm going to do a series of slow tapping. And then after, 15 seconds, something along those lines, I'm going to ask you, okay, when you focus on the incident and the words, the positive belief, how true those words feel to you. And I'm going to continue to do that until it gets all the way up to a 7. So once you report that it's completely true, then we've basically installed that new governor on your brain. And when you refer back to that incident, you're going to think of that positive belief instead of that old negative belief that we got rid of. And
it's not like I'm reminding myself to think positively. What you're saying is that subconsciously, my reaction is this new thing that we as the team, because it's really a we thing. You gotta like let it happen.
Yeah.
You're a part of it as the practitioner, helping me and guiding me, but I'm a part of installing these thoughts because I have to believe it and be a part of it. And at this point, you kind of get your evidence that it worked by me not having that, I feel okay about it. I'm okay with this incident that happened. I'm okay with the situation maybe I'm in.
Yeah, you're not going to have that stress response when you think back. And what we've done is we've hardwired that belief in. It's not like you're just trying to convince yourself of it.
That's what I mean.
Like with all that, we've created new neural connections that are actually communicating back and forth to the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and some other structures.
Which is not getting a parasympathetic response now every time. I'm just sitting, and then all of a sudden my cortisol dumps because I had a thought.
Yeah.
That's really hard on your body. You could be sitting there doing nothing, being totally destroyed from the inside out with your hormone dumps.
Yeah.
And what this is doing is allowing me to just subconsciously run at a nice pace. My neutral's nice. I can look at things that are not good and go, okay, that is what it is. So who are the types of humans and people that would really benefit from this? And I'm guessing you don't just jump into this therapy probably before to kind of like see what's going on.
Really anybody who's had trauma exposures, but I use EMDR to treat all kinds of stuff, OCD, anxiety, depression, eating disorders. I've really taken an approach to just use it to treat everything. But traditionally, it's known for treating PTSD and traumatic exposures.
Well, all the things you named there might be rooted in someone's personal trauma. So I'm guessing foundationally, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, there's symptoms involved with PTSD, or there's something that's resulted from childhood trauma or some sort of trauma, right? Majority of things that we do that are behavioral are trying to gain control. And often that's a response from being exposed to trauma, right? If we can control everything, well, we're not going to get harmed or we're not going to get hurt. So,
it's a trick our brain plays on us, right? If you're always in control, then you can never be hurt.
Well, that's the funny thing about anxiety is like we worry about all this stuff in the future to try to get control over it. But it just makes us anxious. You know what I mean? So it's just like this repetitive cycle that we get stuck
Which
in.
Makes sense of why it's like a computer program run amok. It's you're totally hitting it here. You and I were talking at lunch about how your brains are really just biological quantum computers that run on synapses that can, learn and relearn. And so we're basically completely elastic in the way that we can get hurt pretty easy, but we can unhurt relatively easy as well.
Yeah. EMDR is a great way to do that and release that stress response that's stored in us, because once we get stuck, I think 70 to 80% of people that are exposed to trauma don't develop PTSD. But for those other people that do, that stress response is stuck in their system. So every time it comes up or you think of it or you're triggered, you relive that stress response. So EMDR is a good way to release that stress response so you don't continue to experience in the present. It's just a past memory and some past incident that happened.
Yeah, and it's not a medication. It's not like you get sedated to get into it. It's a might help, can't hurt situation with backed evidence. It's data-driven, all those other things. There's a few other things that are out there that are very similar, like brain spotting that we've learned about on this podcast. How do those line up? Are they similar? Are they much different? Or are they all just fundamentally, basic same ideas?
They all have a different variation. From what I've learned, I did cognitive processing therapy. Like I had mentioned earlier, I did trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. It's all about changing the stuck point, which is in cognitive processing therapy, or the belief, which is in EMDR. So it's changing like that cognition or the belief from a negative to a positive aspect or cognition. So it's about switching that around or rewiring and getting some of those parts of your brain that go offline during trauma exposure to go back online so they can communicate back and forth to the amygdala. Once you've had that traumatic exposure, especially when you develop PTSD, your amygdala is kind of running the show at that point. So we got to get those other structures to start communicating back and forth. And a lot of it is getting those positive thoughts and cognitions wired back to it so they can calm that amygdala and sort of rationalize with it.
Right. You remind everybody what the function of the amygdala is and why that's such a significant statement.
It's kind of the smoke detector of the brain, right? So it's an old caveman structure. It pairs associations with things. It can pair an association with something that you don't even have a memory of either. So the amygdala is where the fight, flight, or freeze response comes from. So that's where you generate all that stress response that you might feel. When you feel nervousness with anxiety, that's because the amygdala is sensing something dangerous. And it's almost it's a false alarm is what I teach people at my clinic. It just is sending all these false signals. It's great when it works and it functions when somebody pulls a gun on you and it prepares you to take off.
Or like you said,
running.
Caveman, like I'm being chased by a giant saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
Probably a great response to have.
But it's difficult when you're in like a podcast room and there's not really any threats, right?
And your biggest threat is the camera's looking at me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people freeze up.
Yeah.
Right? So that's that same feeling of like, oh.
Yeah, it's that same nervousness. So and then we target that a lot with relaxation techniques that I would teach you. And we would lead up to, like, before we get into that processing stage in EMDR, that's what you're going to go through with me in my clinic, is going through a series of coping skills so we can help you regulate some of the symptoms that you're dealing with and prepare you to process. So
what are those coping skills? Like, give me your top 3 coping skills for your average everyday American.
So relaxation techniques, I would go with deep breathing. So a pattern, I have a couple different patterns to regulate your nervous system.
Is anyone better than the other, or is it just controlling and being in tune?
2 primarily, so a stabilizing one. So I try to teach you what inhalation and exhalation does at my clinic, right? So one activates sympathetic, the other activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So we want to give you a balanced technique. A lot of people know 4 square or box breathing. They teach box breathing in the military. This is something good for first responders, say like running, going on a call, right? And then when you and I are just sitting here talking, you want to double the length of the exhale to activate more parasympathetic, or what I also teach people at work is that just act like exhalation's like the brake pedal in a car. So you're slowing it down more than you're speeding it up, essentially. So double length exhale. So 5 in through your nose, 10 out through your mouth. So I like to teach the difference in those 2 and get people practicing and regulating those. I also like to mix in some grounding techniques so they understand that. But the other ones I like to talk about are huge, are meditation. That's a really good one. And also I like to bring on the holistic components of diet, sleep, and exercise is one of the best coping skills ever. That's one of the best relaxation techniques, and then social supports. But backing up to like relaxation stuff, exercise is really important because now that's going to burn off some of that adrenaline that's dumped in your bloodstream from that fight, flight, or freeze response. So
everybody says they feel better when they get out and go do anything. And I don't mean to make it sound like go to the gym and really get a pump on. I mean literally going for a walk, or want to jump rope super hard for 30 minutes, or whatever degree. You just feel better.
Yeah.
Our bodies were made to be a part of this earth and go around and do stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that, the caveman part of our brain that gets the monkey mind, I think you satisfy it when you just get out.
Yeah. We're built to move. We're not built to sit at a desk and go to the grocery store and get our food. If we think about how we used to survive, it was a bunch of work.
Yeah.
Really. A bunch of physical
all these
activity.
thoughts had a place to be. And, you bring up a great point, again, of the caveman mind, is those things were built for a reason. They evolved in a certain way to keep us moving to get to here. Now we're like, we say first world problems. We got like big brain, top of the food chain problems where we have all this computing power that we don't know what to do with it in our minds. And it's almost overwhelming to have these type of thoughts, no matter what type of lifestyle that you do have. But the coping skills, it sounds like, is that really that preventative maintenance, that no matter how, what part of mental health, whether you're mentally healthy or not so healthy right now, the coping skills and having those things that you mentioned is just so important to have in your life all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And to back up, the main coping skills that I always teach are some breathing techniques, right? Meditation. And I try to emphasize exercise. Also self-care, that would branch into some of the other stuff as far as doing your hobbies. Diet, sleep, exercise, social supports, and all that kind of stuff.
And having boundaries too, right?
Yeah.
Some people say yes to too many things and they get over busy and they don't take care of themselves. So I think self-care a lot of times is saying no to people. Mm-hmm. I know. And I'm bringing this up because I'm very guilty of this. Is just telling everybody yes. Oh, I'll do it. I'll get it done. I'd love to help you. And the next thing you know, I'm like exhausted.
Yeah. I'll figure it out. I'll just sleep an hour less.
Yeah. No big deal.
I'll drink more coffee.
Right. Exactly. And then now we're stacking bad habits. And next thing you know, we're run down.
Yeah.
And then a bad thing happens to us, and now it hurts twice as bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Your resiliency is way down at that point, right? That brings me into some of the resiliency components that I like to focus on with people. One of them is, I'll just start with that, is marriage, right? So if you're married or in a relationship, make sure that's going strong. That's one of your biggest supports, right? That's the person that you go home to. So your wife and kids, or your husband and kids. So making sure the family structure is really sound and going well there. Another thing I see a lot is financial stress with people. So I work on budgeting. I'm a big Dave Ramsey guy. So I work people through forming a budget and trying to manage some of their financial stresses. I find that as another important resiliency factor. Something else I already mentioned, but the other resiliency factors are diet. So maintaining a healthy diet is super important. Having a good sleep schedule, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, quality sleep every night. Exercising several times a week. It doesn't have to be go kill yourself for 4 hours every day in the gym, but something like we talked about, just moving, getting some of that energy out and keeping yourself healthy. And then maintaining strong social support. So being part of a community, whether that's volunteering somewhere or being part of a church community, just some sort of community that reduces that feeling of being alone. It's hard to go through things when we go alone or when we're alone.
Yeah, there's few things in the world that are like so innately human. One of them is being outside doing stuff. The other one is sitting around a circle, putting food in your mouth, whether it's around a table or a fire or whatever. And the other one's just doing stuff throughout the day with other people with a common mission.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, that's one of those things that reduces the likelihood of developing PTSD after a traumatic exposure is the support you feel and support you have after an incident. So that just brings me back to the need for the social support. So
that goes really strong for the family that we feel in the firehouse. And I know a lot of police officers, you and I I am a fireman. You obviously served a long time. Our experience is you feel the family, you feel that. And the stronger that is with your crew, you can't hurt me because I have, like you said, that support system. And the immediate support system is so big. Yeah. You're going to go home. You're going to have a wife or a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or whatever, maybe to help support you. But I think it's so important to have that really good relationship with the people you work with. Even if you don't really like them that much, still your family. Still got to love them because it's going to come down to it one day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that brings me back to another thing that reduces the likelihood of developing PTSD after traumatic exposure. It's leadership within your organization. So within the fire service or police department or any organization, leadership plays a big role in how people function after traumatic exposure. So
before we leave, why don't you give a message to all those leaders? What should leaders of our FST5, that's police, fire, EMS, corrections, and dispatch, what can they do to help fortify a system of mental and behavioral health for their personnel?
I think look out for each other, recognize when people have been exposed to different traumas and had really difficult calls. Give them a break afterwards too. You know, you hear so many times where, say, an officer was shot or there was a fatal fire, and then people get sent right back on the job the next day. I know while they're on duty that day, it's a little bit different, but maybe even pulling some of those guys out of service or just recognizing that those guys are going through things. And then just giving them that time and also encouraging them and being able to plug them into therapeutic support. I think everybody should have some sort of connection with a therapist. And then when things get rough, I mean, increase the intensity. Studies show that like the more intense therapy approaches after traumatic exposure, the better off the treatment outcomes are always going to be. So
that's some good advice, is that, have a therapist in place to handle your people, even if they're not going to have one for you. One that's hopefully culturally competent. One that has already built rapport with people like the people that serve with you, and to be ready for the next bad day, because unfortunately they're going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Bryan, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on here. We're going to have you back soon. And for those of you listening, Bryan is one of the culturally competent providers on the FST website. So if you're looking for a good provider, I don't know how much room Bryan's got left on his roster, but he'll try to help you out.
Yes, sir. Well, we are training up additional clinicians right now. I have a couple that are already ready, but I'm training some more in CPT and EMDR to take on some more first responders. So. Right
on. And where can they find you if they want to get a hold of you? What's the name of your website?
abhtherapymi.com. So we're Arrowhead Behavioral Health out of Fowlerville, Michigan.
And that's a big one because there's a couple of them out there. You're specifically out of Fowlerville.
Yes, sir.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you to Bryan Blattert for joining us in the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope everyone enjoyed this episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.